Pablo Escobar was a notorious drug lord and one of the most powerful and feared criminals of the 20th century. Born in Colombia in 1949, Escobar grew up in poverty and turned to a life of crime at a young age. He quickly rose to prominence in the world of drug trafficking, becoming the leader of the notorious Medellin cartel in the 1980s. During this time, he amassed an enormous fortune, built a vast criminal empire, and was responsible for countless acts of violence and murder. Despite being hunted by the authorities and facing constant threats from rival cartels, Escobar remained one of the most elusive and charismatic figures in the world of organized crime. This is the story of his rise to power, his violent reign as a drug kingpin, and his eventual downfall at the hands of his enemies. Pablo Escobar was born in 1949 in Rio Negro, a small town nestled in the Andes Mountains of Colombia. He was the third of 7 children in a modest family that struggled to make ends meet. Pablo's father worked as a farmer, and his mother was a school teacher. Despite their limited means, they instilled a sense of hard work and discipline in their children. Pablo was a curious child who loved to explore the countryside, and he often helped his father with farm chores. However, as he grew older, Pablo began to realize that his family's financial situation was not going to improve anytime soon. He started to look for ways to make money on his own, and his entrepreneurial spirit led him down a dark path. When Pablo was 13 years old, he stole a bicycle and sold it for a profit. He quickly realized that he could make more money by stealing other things and reselling them. He started with small items like candy and toys, but soon moved on to bigger and more lucrative targets. One day, while walking through a cemetery, Pablo noticed that some of the tombstones were made of expensive marble. He saw an opportunity and began stealing them and selling them to construction companies. He made a substantial amount of money from this venture and used it to buy a motorcycle, which he used to transport drugs. However, it was not until his early adulthood that he stumbled upon the drug business. While working as a car thief, he was introduced to a group of men who offered him the opportunity to make money by transporting marijuana from Colombia to the United States. Pablo jumped at the chance and soon found himself deeply involved in the drug trade. He quickly realized that there was much more money to be made by trafficking cocaine, which was becoming increasingly popular in the United States. The Medellin cartel, founded by Pablo Escobar, was one of the most notorious drug trafficking organizations in the world, known for its ruthless tactics and vast criminal empire. The story of the Medellin cartel began in the 1970s, when Pablo Escobar started to smuggle cocaine into the United States. With the help of a group of loyal associates, he built a massive drug trafficking network that spanned the globe. The cartel quickly became known for its brutal tactics, which included assassinations, bombings, and kidnappings. The group was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, including politicians, journalists, and innocent bystanders. Despite the cartel's violent reputation, it managed to maintain a level of popular support in Colombia, where many people saw Pablo Escobar as a Robin Hood figure who provided jobs and social services to the poor. The United States, however, saw the Medellin cartel as a major threat to national security and launched a massive crackdown on the organization in the 1980s. The Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, worked closely with the Colombian government to dismantle the cartel's operations and capture its leaders. Pablo Escobar's influence in politics was largely negative, as he used his wealth and power to bribe and intimidate politicians, judges, and other officials. He sought to gain political power to protect his criminal activities and further his own interests, rather than to promote the public good. One of Escobar's most notorious acts of political violence was the assassination of Colombian presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán in 1989. Galán was a vocal opponent of the drug trade and had promised to crack down on drug trafficking if elected. Escobar saw Galán as a threat to his criminal empire and ordered his murder, which was carried out by one of Escobar's hitmen. Escobar also ran for political office himself, using his wealth and influence to win a seat in Colombia's Congress in 1982. During his time in office, he used his position to protect his criminal activities and push for laws that would benefit his drug trafficking operations. Pablo Escobar was the richest criminal in history, with a net worth of over $30 billion at the peak of his power. He had amassed his wealth through the production and distribution of cocaine, which he had turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Escobar's money had brought him immense power and influence, allowing him to bribe politicians, judges, and law enforcement officials. He had built an enormous estate, complete with a zoo, a private airstrip, and a fleet of luxury cars. His family was similarly wealthy, with his wife and children living in opulent mansions and enjoying a lavish lifestyle. Despite his immense wealth, Escobar lived in constant fear. He knew that the authorities were after him, and he was constantly on the move, living in hiding and surrounded by bodyguards. He also faced threats from rival cartels who saw him as a threat to their own operations. But Escobar's wealth and power also brought him a sense of invincibility. He believed that he was untouchable and that his money and influence could protect him from any threat. He continued to operate his drug empire with ruthless efficiency, even as the noose began to tighten around him. In the mid-1990s, as the authorities closed in on him, Escobar decided to build himself a prison. But this was no ordinary prison. Known as La Cathedral, the facility was more like a luxury resort than a penitentiary. It had a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and even a waterfall. Escobar's cell was more like a suite, with a king-size bed, a TV, and a private bathroom. At La Cathedral, Escobar lived in relative comfort, surrounded by a team of loyal henchmen who catered to his every whim. He continued to run his drug empire from behind bars, using a sophisticated communication network to stay in touch with his operatives on the outside. But La Cathedral was not to last. The Colombian government became aware of the luxurious conditions inside the prison, and the public outcry was deafening. They demanded that Escobar be moved to a more secure facility, one that would be more befitting of a man responsible for so much violence and bloodshed. Escobar's influence allowed him to discover the plan in advance and make a successful escape, spending the remainder of his life evading the police. For Escobar, it was a bitter blow. He had believed that his money and influence could protect him from anything, even the Colombian government. But he had been wrong. La Cathedral remained standing for many years, a testament to the excess of a man consumed by his own paranoia and greed. Today, it is a tourist attraction visited by thousands of people each year who come to see the luxury prison that was once home to one of the most notorious criminals in history. In 1993, after years of pursuing Escobar, the Colombian government finally closed in on him. They had been tracking his movements and had located him in a safe house in the city of Medellin. A team of special forces was dispatched to capture or kill him. The operation was intense and chaotic, with gunfire and explosions echoing through the streets. Escobar was surrounded by his loyal bodyguards who fought fiercely to protect him. But despite their efforts, the government forces were able to breach the safe house and get inside. What happened next is still a matter of some debate. Some reports suggest that Escobar was shot multiple times in the back as he tried to flee across the rooftops of neighboring buildings. Others claim that he was shot in a firefight with the government forces. Regardless of the specifics, the end result was the same. Pablo Escobar, the most powerful drug lord in the world, was dead. His reign of terror had come to an end, but his legacy would live on for many years to come. For many Colombians, Escobar's death was a moment of relief and catharsis. They had lived in fear of his violent and unpredictable ways for far too long. But for others, it was a moment of sadness and mourning. Escobar was a hero to some, a Robin Hood-like figure who had used his wealth and power to help the poor and the oppressed. Today, nearly 3 decades after his death, Pablo Escobar remains a controversial and divisive figure. He is remembered both as a ruthless criminal and as a charismatic leader who was able to inspire loyalty and devotion among his followers. But regardless of how he is remembered, there is no denying the impact that he had on the world of organized crime and on the history of Colombia. The death of Pablo Escobar had far-reaching consequences, both for Colombia and for the wider world. In the years that followed his death, the Medellin cartel, which he had led, began to crumble as other drug lords vied for power and control over the lucrative cocaine trade. The Colombian government, meanwhile, continued its campaign against the drug trade with the help of the United States and other countries. While the drug trade has not been eradicated, it has been significantly disrupted, and Colombia has made great strides in reducing the level of violence and instability that once plagued the country. But Escobar's legacy goes beyond just the drug trade. He was one of the first drug lords to use violence and intimidation on a massive scale, and he developed a sophisticated system of bribery and corruption that allowed him to operate with impunity for many years. He also had a significant impact on Colombian politics and society, shaping the way that many people viewed their government and their place in the world. His willingness to use violence to achieve his goals and his ability to inspire loyalty among his followers made him a formidable adversary for anyone who crossed him. Today, nearly 3 decades after his death, Pablo Escobar remains a controversial and divisive figure. But regardless of how he is viewed, there is no denying that his legacy will continue to be felt for many years to come. Whatever one's opinion of Pablo Escobar may be, there is no denying that he was a larger-than-life figure who left an indelible mark on the world. His death was a turning point in the war on drugs, and it served as a warning to others who would try to follow in his footsteps. And while his story may be over, his legacy lives on as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and greed.